So you want a cycling computer, that's great. There are loads of good options in 2025, but the one that you probably want isn't even that new. I'm going to take you through the options and let you know why I would or wouldn't buy each one. And let's start with Garmin. The latest Garmin Edge 1050 is Garmin's most expensive to date at $700. It's got a few new features like a group ride function so your mates don't get lost when you drop them, and a road hazard function to point out potholes to other users. But honestly, this is one I'd miss. Most of the new features won't actually start working properly until a bunch of new people actually start using them, and to do that they need this unit. While it's so expensive, you might as well just go for the 1040. Most of the same features, 130 quid cheaper. It's still got a massive screen if you want that, and from using this over the past year and a bit, I can tell you the battery life is excellent. Garmin claims 35 hours with demanding use, so that's running the dual band GPS and a few sensors. Now, unless you're a pro, that's going to mean just over 2 weeks of riding between charges. Well, it does for me anyway. If you don't live somewhere with loads of sunshine, like the UK, honestly, I promise it's not like this every day, then I wouldn't bother with the solar version. That, by the way, will be a theme for the next computer too. But this 1040 is really good if you want a big device with a big screen size. Moving on, and we have the Edge 840. This is basically the 1040 in a smaller form factor, and of the two, it's the one I prefer for road riding. It's just a bit neater on my bars, and I think the screen size is big enough for loads of data and a clear map. This is the solar version which I tested, and again, I wouldn't bother with it. Now, on my video review, there were a few of you, mostly based in the southern states of the US, I think, where the sun always shines, who said that the tech really works for you. And that's great. If you live somewhere where the tech is going to work and you want to spend the money, then you do it. It's just for me, it didn't really provide much value. Anyway, I love using the UI on this thing. It's fast enough to get going and navigating pages is easy. I like little things like the music controls because I tend to just leave this screen on when I go for a ride these days. There's also good add-ons, like I've got my core temperature sensor data just here. It's worth noting though, this UI was really designed for touchscreens. I had the Edge 542, but didn't get around to reviewing it. It's really similar to this internally with just a couple of spec downgrades, but the key thing is it doesn't have a touchscreen. Now, some of you will love that, but I found the button navigation with this UI was quite clunky, like it was an afterthought for Garmin. Still, 350 quid for this, which is a darn sight cheaper than the three we've just looked at. And before we leave Garmin's road performance range, a quick shout out to what is still Ash Quinlan's favourite computer. And it's our pick. It's the Edge 830. This thing boasts a great screen, good mapping, solid battery life, and a nice form factor. Now, annoyingly, this has now moved to Garmin's discontinued list, so it is getting a bit tricky to find for sale online. Still, if you can find one, it's the Garmin we'd recommend. That's not to say it's perfect. These comments landed on our Gear of the Year video. There are definitely some issues with the 830, but there are with all tech really. The Garmin Edge Explore 2 is still loaded with a compelling set of features for most riders. Ease of use and setup are all huge plus points too, thanks to Garmin's improved interface, a clear and detailed screen, and dependable rerouting. The standard version tested here doesn't get the power pins in the core to turn mount, so the fact that it can't be upgraded to use the power pack is a shame. We'd really like to have seen this be a possible upgrade pathway at this price, rather than forcing you to spend £90 more for the option. The omission of connectivity to both Shimano Di2 and SRAM Access drivetrains might be a snag, but it's not likely to be a deal breaker for most. Right, onto some Wahoos now, starting with the Elemnt Ace and its wind sensing front end. Now, I've had a little bit of time on this unit, and while Ash thought it was actually quite good, in my opinion, it just misses the mark, which is annoying because I was so excited when I saw the leaked images of this. Yes, they've done a great job with the touchscreen. and they delivered what a lot of Wahoo fans were asking for, namely a bigger and better display. They've even made that UI super nice to use, and the app is still a strong point. But it was released unfinished and with too many key features yet to be launched.
Now, my opinion differs from Ash, but the headwind sensor is just a big gripe for me. I just don't get who is genuinely going to find this useful. If it's windy out, which today it isn't, well, you can feel it.
Nor can you analyse this data on third-party apps like Strava. You'll need to do that in the Wahoo app. Now, Wahoo says that the wind sensor could eventually be used for some drag calculations, giving you a little bit of live aero data, but there's no date set for this upgrade.
There are still some issues with certain units. I went out with Jamie Williams from Road CC, and his wouldn't connect to GPS. It refused to show him any distance, it disconnected from his power meter, and he can't upload a ride unless he connects it to his computer. Our unit is fine, I have to say, but it doesn't really fill me with confidence.
It's also absolutely massive, with continuing compatibility issues on bike computer mounts. So really, there are still too many things wrong here for me to recommend it, and that's a massive shame.
Thankfully, Wahoo's Element Roam and Bolt V2s continue to be absolutely excellent options. Starting with the Roam, which I think size-wise kind of sits between the Garmin Edge 1040 and the 840, which I think is a nice little compromise.
My favourite trick that Wahoo uses is perfect zoom, which is controlled via the two buttons here. Hit the upper side button and you reduce the number of fields displayed and increase their size. You can display just your single highest priority data items, such as power, if you want. The lower side button has the reverse effect. That makes it easy to tailor your display on the fly to see a smaller or larger selection of data fields, without needing to fiddle with screen and field dimensions in the phone app. This also works way better on the map pages than Garmin's zoom buttons. I really like this a lot. And speaking of maps, following a route is dead easy because the map is really clear. But if you're trying to select a point to route to, the lack of a touchscreen makes the process, well, quite slow.
That said, it's still a brilliant device, but it's not my favourite Wahoo.
That is still the Bolt V2. This thing does everything that most of us want it to. It's small, it's light, it displays your data, and then it allows you to analyse that data. The battery life stands at a decent 15 hours, and again, routes are easy to follow.
I have to say, I'm really keen to see a new Bolt from Wahoo this year. I've had a few occasional rides on it, and I absolutely love it. And I have to say that my friends are big fans too.
But, and this might be controversial with Wahooligans, I'd like to see it get the touchscreen from the latest Ace. I'd also like it to lose the convex buttons and the 4 headlights because I want Wahoo to make the Bolt with a proper edge-to-edge display.
Keep the form factor small, but give me a properly sized screen. Do that and I think it will blow Garmin out of the water. Hammerhead's latest Karoo is well worth a look if you use a SRAM Access group set and you're quite a techie person. Though because Shimano isn't playing nicely with all the other children, it doesn't work brilliantly for Di2 users.
Mapping on here is excellent, and Hammerhead was actually the first brand to give us a climbing feature to help you pace your efforts uphill. I still really love the way Hammerhead's climb program looks and works. In fact, I'd say I prefer it quite a bit over Garmin's. But the one real annoyance for me of every Karoo I've used is that it's so slow, and I don't get why. Let's side by side boot this up next to the 840. Now the RAM has doubled to 4 gig, and the processor has nearly doubled in speed to 2 gigahertz. So why is this thing taking so long to get going? Oh, and that's assuming that the unit isn't doing one of its regular updates. We're talking every 2 weeks or so, which is fine if you're a techie person that likes seeing loads of new updates. It's just maybe not so good for the more casual user. I will say though, Hammerhead launched this unit fully baked, so this isn't a Wahoo Ace situation. Hammerhead is simply continuing to add stuff to what is already a great unit.
But apart from a few gremlins, this is a super interesting device to own. Basically because it keeps getting better. Like with Wahoo's Ace, Coros were slightly silly in launching this Dura before it was really ready. But now I have to say it represents a very decent option from a challenger brand.
The clear standout feature is the claimed battery life and everything around the runtime. Now, Coros claims a 120-hour battery life with single band GPS running, but, and this is a big but, this rather large forehead is a solar panel, and Coros says that it will give you 2 hours of battery gain for every hour you ride. But as you can see, the battery claims might not live up to expectations if the conditions are anything other than a hot summer's day. At launch, the unit had all sorts of issues with Ant Plus devices. Power meters, for example, weren't able to communicate properly with the unit, so you ended up with big sections of your ride at 1 wattage, which made all of your power data completely useless. Thankfully, this all seems to have been sorted now. Navigation is good now, but you'll still need the Coros app running on your phone and your phone to have a good internet connection to do any rerouting. Coros is huge in the sports wearables world, and I wouldn't doubt that they'll kill it with a V2, but this one isn't. Best to avoid. Those of you who remember Joe Knowledge will remember fondly his neckbeard and his unfussy nature. This is a computer for him and riders like him who want a simple system to display power, speed, and not much more. That is only slightly true, because the rocks will display all manner of data fields which you can customize through the app.
It's a super compact unit and easily the lightest on test here at just 55 grams. And while I wouldn't say that 170 quid is anywhere near cheap, it's certainly the most affordable of today's test. So if you're not bothered with what is essentially a smartphone for your bike, well, give this thing a look. So, in my opinion, the Edge 830 is still the GPS computer to buy in 2025. You just really can't beat this for value right now. If you want to see Ash's take on the Edge 1050 versus the Wahoo Ace, why not click on here?